So, usually when we picture the defining moments that make or break a company, we tend to imagine these, I don't know, these really grand cinematic scenes, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Like the visionary founder having a eureka moment in a dimly lit garage.
Right, exactly. Or like two massive tech giants locked in this high-stakes courtroom battle over some patent. We're totally conditioned to expect that the survival of a multi-million-dollar corporation hinges on something, well, something glamorous, something revolutionary.
Yeah, and we cling to that narrative because it's exciting, right? I mean, the lone genius changing the world with a single product is a very comforting, easily digestible story.
Yeah, it really is.
But if you look at the actual mechanics of modern business, especially after the massive corporate shifts and all that merger mania of the 1990s, that glamorous narrative just completely falls apart.
It really does.
In the mid-90s, the landscape fundamentally changed. You had corporate giants just swallowing up the market. So suddenly, you weren't selling your product to like 50 independent regional retailers anymore. You were selling to one or two massive global conglomerates.
And because of that intense consolidation, your survival was no longer just about having the best product on the shelf. Like, the product actually became secondary to the service.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the core mission of today's deep dive for you guys listening. We are taking Tom Markert's playbook. It's called You Can't Win a Fight with Your Customer, and we're distilling the absolute best, most counterintuitive strategies for mastering client relationships.
It's such a fascinating text.
It really is. We're going to uncover why keeping a massive account alive isn't about being a sycophant, and it's definitely not about having a slate, flashy sales pitch. It is all about strategic humility, obsessive preparation, and, honestly, learning to entirely check your ego at the door.
Yeah, and to really understand the stakes here, there's this defining anecdote from the source material that it perfectly captures this structural paradigm shift.
Oh, the CEO story.
Yes. So it involves the CEO of a major global consumer goods company. Someone asks this CEO a very simple question. They ask, who is the most important person in your entire organization?
Which seems like a trap, honestly.
Right. Now think about that. You would naturally assume they'd name the head of research and development or the CFO or maybe some key board member, but they don't.
No.
They name the person running the Walmart account.
Just a single account manager. That's wild.
Exactly, just one account manager. And the reasoning is terrifyingly simple. Walmart controlled over 40% of their total business.
Wow.
So if that single account manager missteps, if they lose that relationship, the entire multinational company folds. Thousands of jobs, decades of innovation, just gone. One person holds the thread.
Yeah, that account manager isn't an innovator in the traditional sense, but they're literally the ultimate guardian of the company's lifeblood.
Absolutely.
And that sheer concentration of risk is just staggering. It puts an unimaginable amount of pressure on the day-to-day interactions between the vendor and the client, which kind of highlights the first major hurdle Markert outlines in his playbook.
The informational baseline.
Right. Before you can even begin to navigate the complex interpersonal dynamics of a massive account like that, you have to master the boring stuff, the informational baseline. You cannot charm or fake your way through an account of that magnitude.
You absolutely cannot.
Yeah.
The text is incredibly strict about this baseline, actually.
Yeah.
It demands an encyclopedic knowledge of your own products and your client's business.
Which makes sense.
It does, but it makes a point that I think is a really hard pill to swallow for a lot of professionals. I mean, we've all been in a situation where a client asks us a question, and we give a superficial answer like, I'm not exactly sure. Let me check on that and get back to you.
Yeah, people say that all the time. It feels polite.
Right. We think that sounds helpful and proactive. But Markert argues that this is an instant credibility killer.
It really is. The text actually backs this up with data from Fortune's 100 best companies to work for, pointing out that top-tier organizations mandate over 30 hours of training for their employees annually for a reason.
Yeah.
Like deep, immediate product knowledge is just non-negotiable.
Exactly.
But let's dig into the psychology of why saying, "I'll check on that," is so damaging. Because when a client asks a question, it's usually because they have an immediate operational problem.
Precisely. They have a gap in their workflow.
Right.
So when you say, I'll get back to you, you aren't solving their problem. You are actually adding to their cognitive load.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
You've just given them a new chore, which is remembering to follow up with you.
Right.
You've shifted the burden of waiting on to them. The goal isn't just to be polite. The goal is to offer a complete solution in the moment.
Right.
You need to do all the legwork beforehand so that when you finally speak, you deliver a comprehensive, actionable response.
Wait, let's play devil's advocate for a second here, because we've all been in meetings where a client asks a hyper-specific, totally out of left field question that nobody could have anticipated.
Yeah.
Isn't it objectively safer and like more honest to just say, I don't know, rather than guessing, giving them the wrong info and causing a massive disaster? I mean, the text explicitly warns against lying or misrepresenting facts.
It does, and that's a crucial distinction. Lying or guessing is universally fatal to trust. So if you truly do not know, yes, you must admit it.
Right.
But Markard's point is that settling for "I don't know" as your default response to standard
Mm-hmm.
operational questions exposes a severe lack of preparation. It shows you haven't anticipated their needs.
Ah, I see.
The standard shouldn't be reacting to their questions. The standard should be knowing their business mechanics so intimately that you anticipate the friction before they even feel it.
Which explains one of the more grueling directives in the playbook, which is reading the client's annual report cover to cover, which, let's be honest, sounds like a total cure for insomnia.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, those documents are notoriously dry. It's just hundreds of pages of financial jargon and corporate boilerplate.
They are dense, yeah. But think about what an annual report actually represents. It is the single most transparent document a company produces.
That's true.
It is the only place where top management explicitly outlines their strategic goals, their deep-seated financial anxieties, and their long-term vision to their shareholders. If you haven't absorbed that document, how can you possibly align your daily services to help them?
You can't.
Exactly. You might be pitching a strategy for rapid market expansion, while their annual report explicitly states they're entering a period of aggressive cost-cutting and consolidation.
Yeah, you'd be completely tone deaf to their reality. It's like trying to build a house on sand.
Perfectly said.
You can have the most charismatic sales pitch in the world. You can take their executives to the best steakhouses in town. But if you haven't read the contract binding you together, or, you don't understand their specific metrics for ROI.
Whether they are desperate for high profit margins right now or purely chasing sales volume.
Exactly. If you don't know that, that relationship is going to collapse. Period.
Doing that boring prep work transitions you from being a vendor who sells things to a proactive partner who solves things. You have to know their business as well as they do.
Right.
But once you have that unshakable informational baseline, you face a much more nuanced challenge. How do you actually get inside the room? Like,
Right.
how do you physically and culturally integrate yourself into the client's world to become that indispensable ally without causing massive friction?
Because nobody likes an outsider parachuting in and telling them how to run their shop, right?
No one.
The corporate immune system naturally attacks foreign bodies. Which brings us to some of the most fascinating physical and psychological tactics in the source material, starting with the concept of working at the absolute center of the customer's business. There is this mind-blowing example of Bentonville, Arkansas, the headquarters of Walmart.
Oh, it's a perfect illustration of this principle in action.
Yeah. Hundreds of massive global suppliers didn't just fly their executives in for quarterly review meetings. They physically uprooted their teams and set up permanent offices in Bentonville, which is a relatively small town, simply to be geographically embedded with Walmart. They literally moved into the neighborhood.
Yeah, and that physical proximity is all about creating ambient awareness.
Hmm.
It's about those serendipitous encounters in the parking lot or at the local coffee shop.
Running into people.
Exactly. Proximity breeds familiarity, and familiarity accelerates trust. When you are physically present, you stop being that vendor from Chicago and start being a recognizable fixture in their ecosystem.
That makes total sense.
But simply occupying physical space isn't enough. You have to know how to navigate the psychological space of their office. And the playbook highlights a brilliant tactic here. It's capitalizing on the new employee hack.
This is such a clever manipulation of human nature. The text points out that you only ever get to be the new guy once. There is a very specific, very short grace period where the usual corporate defenses are lowered. People naturally want to help the new person. They want to mentor you, to show you the ropes, and frankly, they just like feeling like the expert.
They really do. It taps into the basic human desire to instruct. Markert advises using this limited window aggressively to audit their systems. Because you are the quote-unquote curious newcomer, you can ask incredibly probing historical questions that would otherwise seem aggressive or intrusive.
Oh, right. Like playing dumb a little bit.
Exactly. You can point to a wildly inefficient process and ask, why is it done this way? What's the origin of this policy?
Yeah.
You can challenge the status quo without triggering their defensive reflexes, simply because you're playing the role of the naive learner, trying to understand their complex world.
It's basically a free pass to forensically examine their entire operation without looking like a hostile auditor. You get to see where all the bodies are buried. But the text also attaches a massive flashing warning light to this deep integration. It insists that while you must embed yourself deeply, you must remain as neutral as Switzerland regarding their internal affairs.
Yeah, this is perhaps the most difficult tightrope walk in account management.
It honestly sounds impossible. You are telling me we are supposed to embed ourselves in their office environment, literally move our team to Bentonville, eat in their cafeteria, learn all their historical quirks, but completely ignore their office drama.
Yes.
But people gossip, factions form, departments wage turf wars against each other. How do you live in a corporate war zone and act like a UN peacekeeper?
It requires immense discipline, I won't lie.
Yeah.
Because human nature wants to tribalize. We naturally want to form alliances. But think about the life cycle of corporate politics.
Okay.
If you align yourself with a specific vice president because they currently hold power, you are tying your company's fate to their personal career trajectory. What happens when that vice president falls out of favor or gets fired next quarter?
Oh, you go down with the ship.
Suddenly, the incoming leadership views you not as an objective vendor, but as a remnant of the old, unwanted regime.
You become collateral damage in a war you had no business fighting.
Precisely. Your singular value to the client is your objective execution and your structural neutrality. The moment you take sides in their internal disputes, you cease to be a reliable resource and become a political liability. You have to be friendly with everyone, but allied with no one except the broader goals of the company itself.
Wow. Okay, but that transition from being a welcome guest to navigating friction is inevitable, right? If you are embedded that deeply doing the real work, personalities are going to clash. Disagreements will happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And what do you do when the client is just objectively, factually wrong about how to proceed? This brings us to the core thesis, the actual title of the playbook. You can't win a fight with your customer.
And this rule is incredibly difficult for highly competent, intelligent people to swallow. When we know we have the better data, when we know our logic is sound, our ego just screams at us to prove it. We want the satisfaction of being right.
And the source material illustrates this ego trap with a brilliantly absurd example. I love this part. It details an actual heated fight between a vendor and a client that escalated over a poultry display arrangement.
Just ridiculous.
Two highly paid professionals getting into a screaming match over how frozen chicken should be presented in a grocery aisle.
Wow.
And the lesson Markert extracts from this absurdity is chillingly clear. You might win the argument. You might whip out your spreadsheets and definitively prove that your poultry arrangement yields a 2% higher conversion rate.
Yeah.
But in doing so, you have humiliated the client. You have bruised their ego. You win the battle over the chickens, but you lose the multi-million-dollar account.
Yeah, the ego cost is always too high. When you force a client to admit defeat, you breed resentment. And this is where the text introduces a framework that completely reframes how we should view client relationships. It's a concept of the cold friendship.
Yes. Let's unpack the story of Audrey Rosen at Knowledge Networks, because this entirely shifted my perspective on professional networking.
It's a powerful case study. So the text details Rosen's interactions with a prominent Gillette executive. They had to work really closely together to face a massive, complex contract over the course of 3 months. But there was a significant problem. They clashed heavily.
They just didn't get along.
Right. Their communication styles were incompatible, their personalities grated on each other, and fundamentally, they simply did not like each other.
Which, in a traditional business narrative, spells absolute doom for the account, right? We're taught that you have to golf with your clients, laugh at their jokes, and basically be best friends to secure the bag.
Right, the myth of mandatory affection. But Rosen and the Gillette executive realized that mutual affection is not a prerequisite for mutual success. They abandoned the pretense of being buddies and established a cold friendship.
A cold friendship.
Yeah. It was a relationship built on hyper-objectivity, rigorous professionalism, and a complete removal of emotional entanglement. They focused entirely on the mechanics of the contract. They didn't pretend to care about each other's weekends. They cared about the mutual goal, and they successfully executed the project.
That's amazing.
The underlying psychology here is incredibly liberating, You do not have to be friends with your client to be excellent allies.
That is such a relief to hear. The emotional labor required to constantly perform warmth for someone you fundamentally clash with is just exhausting. A cold friendship sounds highly efficient.
It really is.
But let me challenge the application of this for a second. Let's say a client is demanding a strategy that, based on hard data, will actively damage their sales. It will ruin the very business you are hired to support.
Okay.
Under the don't fight rule, am I just supposed to smile, nod, and arrange the frozen chickens exactly how they want them, knowing it's a disaster, just to protect their ego and save the account? Isn't that a dereliction of professional duty?
Yeah, that is the ultimate tightrope walk of client service. And it's where Markert synthesizes two distinct principles: protecting the customer from embarrassment while never undermining them. It is absolutely not about rolling over and letting them drive the car off a cliff.
Okay, good.
Because if you do that, you'll be fired anyway when the results tank. It is about how you steer the wheel. It's about diplomatic redirection.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, you have to strip the ego out of the correction. If they suggest a terrible idea, you don't say, "That's wrong and here's why." You say, "That's an interesting approach that highlights X. And if we combine that insight with this new data set, we can evolve the strategy to achieve Y."
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, you frame the pivot not as a correction of their mistake, but as a natural evolution of their initial thought. You guide them to the right answer while letting them feel like they discovered it. You never make them look foolish for their initial suggestion.
It's all about letting them maintain the moral high ground. And speaking of the high ground, the text provides a fascinating example of visual humility to reinforce this dynamic. It advises that you should mirror the client's financial realities, right down to how you travel.
Ah, the Mercedes-Benz CEO story. This perfectly illustrates performative alignment.
Yeah, the source describes a scenario where the CEO of Mercedes-Benz, a person who obviously has the capital to fly private, let alone first class, is traveling with a client. Because the client's company policy mandates economy class travel, the Mercedes CEO intentionally books an economy seat right next to them.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly potent physical gesture. By cramming into a middle seat in coach, he is visually and physically proving that he is committed to the client's reality.
Think about the psychological impact of the alternative. Imagine a client is going through brutal budget cuts and layoffs. If you show up to their office in a bespoke suit, flashing a Rolex, and casually mentioning your first-class flight, you aren't just being tone-deaf.
It's insulting.
Exactly. You are subtly communicating a power imbalance. You are showing them that you are thriving while they are suffering. It creates an immediate subconscious adversarial dynamic. Mirroring their constraints is a profound display of empathy and respect.
Okay, so let's say you've executed all of this flawlessly. You've memorized the boring baseline facts from the annual reports. You've embedded your team in Bentonville neutrally. You've swallowed your ego, established highly functional cold friendships, and you're flying coach.
Perfect.
But let's live in reality here. Even with perfect execution, friction is inevitable. Supply chains fracture, software updates crash the system, deadlines are missed, things will go wrong.
They always do.
Right. And how you handle that crisis dictates whether the relationship survives the impact.
Yeah, this is the crucible of the entire relationship, the shift from theory to radical accountability.
The source material has an incredibly vivid analogy for this exact moment. It asks you to imagine that you are stuck on a commercial airplane that has been snowed in on the tarmac for 5 hours.
A literal nightmare scenario for human patience.
Total nightmare. The cabin is freezing, people are exhausted, and the tension is palpable. In that moment, you essentially have two choices. You can be the passenger who complains loudly, berates the flight attendants, blames the airline's logistics, and generally adds to the panic and toxicity of the cabin.
Right.
Or you can be the person who quietly gets up, walks to the galley, and figures out how to help distribute blankets and water to the shivering passengers. Markert's point is that when a crisis hits with a client, you have to be the blanket guy.
The blanket guy. I love that.
You don't hide, you don't deflect. You deliver the bad news quickly and cleanly, and then you immediately start passing out the blankets.
The psychology of the blanket guy is fascinating because it's fundamentally about locus of control. The complainer is acting like a victim of circumstance, waiting for the system to fix the snowstorm. The blanket person accepts the reality of the crisis and immediately takes agency over the environment. When a client is panicking because a deliverable failed, they don't want to hear about the storm. They want to see someone taking agency. They need a singular point of control. which ties directly into the strict rule against ever making excuses about your own internal company dynamics.
Exactly. The rule is you never blame your internal system or throw the other department under the bus. I was trying to map this onto everyday life, and it perfectly mirrors a high-end restaurant experience.
Okay, how so?
Imagine you order a steak and it arrives completely burned. The waiter comes over, and instead of just apologizing and fixing it, they launch into a 10-minute rant about how the sous chef called in sick, the grill is malfunctioning, and the kitchen management is terrible.
As the customer, you simply do not care.
You don't care at all. You don't care about their organizational chart or their staffing issues. You just want your steak. By throwing their own kitchen staff under the bus, the waiter doesn't protect their personal reputation. They just make the entire restaurant look deeply incompetent and chaotic.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy.
The client is the diner. When you blame your IT department or your logistics team for a failure, you are just telling the client that the house they built their foundation on is structurally unsound.
It shatters their confidence in the whole operation. Stepping up to take the hit personally, even if it was objectively the IT department's fault, triggers a profound sense of psychological safety for the client. You become their shield. You absorb the chaos so they don't have to.
Right.
And Markert pairs this radical accountability with absolute accessibility. The playbook dictates giving the client your direct personal phone numbers. When their metaphorical house is on fire at 2 a.m., they should never have to navigate an automated phone tree or a general support inbox to find you.
And crucially, preserving absolute confidentiality when they do call you in a panic.
Yes, because when you combine that radical accountability, taking the blame with immediate 247 accessibility and ironclad confidentiality, a profound shift occurs.
Yeah.
You transition from being just another vendor on their balance sheet to becoming a trusted confidant.
Wow.
The client learns that not only are you capable of fixing the structural failures, but you possess the discretion to never use their moment of vulnerability as gossip at the next industry mixer. That level of trust is bulletproof.
We have covered a massive amount of conceptual ground here today for you listening, drawing from the very demanding, unglamorous realities of corporate survival outlined in Markert's playbook. We started by looking at the absolute necessity of building an informational foundation.
Right, reading those dry annual reports, memorizing the legal contract.
Exactly, and refusing to shift the cognitive load onto the client with phrases like, I don't know, I'll check.
And then we explore the strategic value of physical and psychological proximity.
Yeah.
Embedding yourself in the client's world, utilizing the grace period of the new guy hack to audit their systems without triggering defenses.
All while maintaining strict Switzerland-like neutrality to survive their internal political wars.
Yeah.
We dissected the trap of the ego, the realization that you might win the logical argument over a poultry display, but you will invariably lose the account if you humiliate the client in the process. We saw how cold friendships, based purely on objective execution rather than forced personal affection, can be incredibly liberating and productive.
So true.
And finally, we examined the crucible of crisis management, the necessity of being the person passing out blankets on the snowed-in airplane, taking the hit, and never ever blaming your own kitchen for the burned steak.
It is a rigorous, demanding framework that requires you to consistently subordinate your own need to be right to the broader goal of being effective.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought to ponder. We spent this time discussing these intense, highly human strategies for relationship retention that were forged in the corporate consolidation of the 1990s. But look at the business landscape today.
It's totally different.
It is. We are rapidly moving into an era where B2B interactions are heavily automated, driven by AI self-service portals, algorithmic ordering, and frictionless digital interfaces.
Which raises a really fascinating question about the future of account management. As the operational mechanics become increasingly automated, does the intense, highly calibrated human touch of a cold friendship become obsolete?
That's the question.
Or, conversely, in a sea of faceless algorithms, does the ability to sit in a room, swallow your ego, and expertly guide a panicking client through a crisis become the single most valuable premium service a company can offer?
Are these intensely human rules dying out, or are they about to become your ultimate competitive advantage? Something to think about next time you feel the urge to prove you're the smartest person in the room. Thank you for joining us on this exploration. Keep questioning your assumptions, keep learning from the fiction, and we will see you next time.